Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Words mean things, or at least they should. Here's Joe Biden's words from August 28, 2019. First of all, I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything to do with their business. From September the same year, I have never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. October, same year, quote, I don't discuss business with my son. Were Joe Biden's words true? No, they were false. So why did he lie repeatedly? In an interview back in 2019 with The New Yorker, even Hunter admitted that he talked to his dad about business, specifically Burisma. Many of Hunter Biden's business associates have testified Joe Biden met with them. Two of the ones closest to Hunter, Rob Walker and Devin Archer, were among them. So they not only spoke to him, they took, a lot of the business associates took photos with him. They played golf with him. Joe Biden gave them White House tours. He wrote letters of recommendation for their children and shared fancy dinners as well. So let's also talk about patterns. Yuri Luzkov and Yelena Baturina. They are Russian. They were married, Russian oligarch billionaires. Michael McFaul, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, ID'd Luzkov as being corrupt. Yelena Baturina wires $3.5 million to Hunter Biden. Soon thereafter, who does she have dinner with? Then Vice President Joe Biden. Kenez Rakishev, and Karim Mazimov, Kazakhstani nationals. Mazimov used to be the prime minister. He's now in prison. Rakishev wires $142,300 to Hunter Biden. The very next day, Hunter Biden buys a Porsche for $142,300. And then soon after, who do you think Kenez Rakishev has dinner with? Say it with me. Then Vice President Joe Biden. Vadim Pazarsky and Mykola Zolchevsky, the CEO and CFO of Burisma. U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, calls Zolchevsky a poster child of corruption. Those two fellas paid Hunter Biden's shell companies a total of $3.3 million. And who do you think Vadim Pazarsky had dinner with? Again, say it with me all at once. Then Vice President Joe Biden. So here's a pattern. You have crooked foreigners that deliver pallets of cash to the Bidens, and then they have dinner with Joe. And apparently Joe Biden is one hell of an expensive dinner date. And if that's not selling political access, I don't know what is. My Democratic colleagues report ad nauseum when they talk to the media that there's no direct evidence linking Joe Biden to his son's crimes. Really? This is a FD 1023, which is used by the FBI when confidential informants give them information. This 1023 is only as good as the source. It could be garbage or it could be gold. The FBI describes this source as somebody that is highly reliable and very trustworthy. In fact, they've worked with him for over a decade and paid him well over $100,000. What he has given to them is always checked out. This, ladies and gentlemen, is gold. Consider this with weight and gravity. So what does this say? I don't know what the confidential informant's name is, so I'm going to call him Ivan. Ivan is not his real name, but Ivan describes Vadim Pazarsky directly admitting to him in a confidential conversation that they hired a not-so-smart Hunter Biden to protect us, quote, through his dad from all kinds of problems. Then Ivan speaks directly to CEO Zolchevsky, and Zolchevsky confides that Hunter Biden will take care of those corruption issues through his dad. Zolchevsky is being investigated by Viktor Shokin, a Ukrainian prosecutor. Joe Biden suddenly begins to call for Shokin's removal. Now, Ivan is also told by Zolchevsky that it cost him $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to pay the other. This is direct evidence of naked corruption and bribery. Zolchevsky also admitted to Ivan that both Bidens pushed him to pay them and to keep Hunter Biden on the board. Please keep in mind, these were confidential conversations. Also interesting that Zolchevsky referred to Biden as the big guy, and I doubt he knows Tony Bobulinski. Shokin seized 2 homes, land, and a Rolls-Royce from Zolchevsky. When he was fired, the Ukrainian president admitted in a phone call to none other than Joe Biden that Shokin didn't do anything wrong, but at your behest, we fired him. And then $1 billion of aid that was being withheld was given to Ukraine. And lastly, after Shokin was fired, Hunter Biden and the other members of the Burisma board wrote a letter to the new prosecutor demanding that Zolchevsky, the investigation into Zolchevsky, ended. And you know what? Shockingly, it did. The message was sent, and the Bidens delivered. Mr. Dubinsky, in your experience in financial investigations, you follow, quote unquote, you follow the money. If you were investigating this and looking at $5 million payment from Burisma to Joe Biden, what kinds of information or patterns would you be looking for?
Well, I'd want to know who, what, when, where, and why. What's going on? Why is the money moving? What's it for? What's the substance behind it? And talk to people. Look at documents and talk to people. That's what we do in investigations. I would venture to say everybody in this chamber, if they were the CEO of a company and they saw money moving like that within their own company, they'd want to get to the truth. They'd want to find out, why is that money moving? Why is somebody paying that money out? Those are the questions that need to be asked and get to the bottom of.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, I have another unanimous consent request. I'd like to enter into the record a July 9th, 2016 letter from 3 Burisma board members, including Hunter Biden, to Yuri Lutsenko, who replaced Shokin as the prosecutor general, expressing concern that Mr. Lutsenko had initiated an investigation into Burisma.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Kassar from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to begin with a quote. The people of America elected all 435 of us to do the things they expect Congress to do. Real business, not theater. Try to have some type of prescription drug reform legislation this year. But instead, the majority party is conducting baseless impeachment hearings. Who do we think said this quote? Was it Nancy Pelosi? Maybe Ranking Member Jamie Raskin? Mr. Chairman, you might recognize that quote because you said this in 2019. You said it on the floor of the U.S. House, saying impeaching Donald Trump was political theater. Trump was first impeached for attempting to extort a foreign president into helping the Trump presidential campaign. And if you didn't consider that criminal, how about when Trump was impeached trying to overthrow the results of the presidential election and then incited a violent insurrection against the government? So if you thought that impeaching Trump was political theater, then what would you call this? This is a disgrace. And I hope that someday top Republican officials will find some integrity. In the case of Trump, because you fear his social media wrath, right-wing officials will deny all evidence against Trump come hell or high water. But in the case of President Joe Biden, you decided to start the impeaching now and figure out the whole evidence thing later. And you still haven't figured it out. Your own Republican-called witnesses today say they don't see the evidence to impeach President Joe Biden. Bunch of stuff about Hunter this, Hunter that, but they've said they don't see the evidence to impeach Joe Biden. That is a disgraceful double standard. It damages our democracy, insults the institution of Congress, and more than anything, disgraces this body in the eyes of the American public. This inquiry is a cynical attempt to tar everyone, to make everyone look suspect, make everyone look corrupt, so that voters just give up and say, there's not much difference here. But we cannot give up on discerning truth from propaganda. We cannot give up on our collective governance. Congress is a place where historically people of enormous integrity have throughout history taken on big challenges of inequality, injustice, instability. We can and must impartially look at the evidence before us and have equal justice under the law. And the evidence before us shows no wrongdoing by President Biden. We haven't seen that evidence throughout the testimony today. Your own Republican-called witnesses have said they haven't seen that kind of evidence. There is separate evidence that supports indictments, unrelated indictments against his son, Hunter, and multiple indictments spanning 91 criminal charges against former President Trump. I, for one, am grateful we have an independent judicial system where a president's son or a former president like Trump can be investigated and prosecuted if they violate the law. It is my firm belief that Hunter and Trump should both face trial and, if guilty, be held accountable for the crimes they've been accused of. Can everyone on the Oversight Committee say the same thing? Well, members of the Oversight Committee, please raise your hand if you believe both Hunter and Trump should be held accountable for any of the indictments against them, if convicted by a jury of their peers. We can take a minute. No, it's serious. This is a serious matter. If y'all need to think about it, we can take a moment and think about it. It is serious. This is very serious. Think about it. Should both Hunter and Trump be held accountable? I want to see whether you'd raise your hands. Should Hunter and Trump both be held accountable if they are found guilty on any of their indictments. Raise your hand if you think that equal justice under the law applies and Trump should be held accountable. I think it is worse than embarrassing that Republicans won't raise their hands. They refuse to say that equal justice under the law should apply to everyone. And when you step back and think about it,
then what about the
it's kind
January
of scary.
6th defendants?
It's kind of scary. This double standard insults the institutions of Congress that people fought and died to build. This impeachment hearing clearly is not about justice. We cannot say equal justice under the law for everyone except for the guy who holds the leash. I'll yield the rest of my time to Ranking Member Raskin.
Thank you. I think as you were being interrupted by several colleagues, I heard one question posed by the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia who said, what about the January 6th defendants, all of whom had lawyers, due process, the presumption of innocence, and they were convicted of various things, including assaulting federal officers and metropolitan police.
What about
as well as
the BLM rioters?
Point of
$2 billion of damage.
Mr. Raskin, if I can take my time back.
Yes, I'll yield
we've
back.
heard, because it wasn't on the microphones, multiple members saying it's wrong that January 6th rioters were convicted by a jury of their peers. That is disturbing. We've started to get used to it, but we can't get used to it.
Gentleman's
It's scary.
time has expired. Now, Chair recognizes
Chairman,
Mr.
point of order.
Perry.
Point of order.
Chair recognizes Mr. Fallon for a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter the 1020 FD 1023 into the record.
Without objection.